All right, welcome in, everybody. It's the Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning. 32 teams in 32 days. Today, the Buffalo Bills. So actually good for the first time since the 90s, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
At least
they've
for this
still
kind of
won as
stretch.
many Super Bowls. So I mean, it's still got to be in the conversation, right?
I can't really make jokes about them anymore.
No, we're not going to make Jim Kelly jokes.
No, I wasn't gonna. I wasn't. No, we're not making Jim Kelly jokes. Okay, we are not making. There's nothing but nice things to say about Jim Kelly. We are not making Jim Kelly jokes.
Yes, but Buffalo jokes more than welcome.
I got all kinds
by the
of
end. By the end of this, Mike will be going through a table. He just doesn't know it yet.
I lent my table to my sister. Shoot.
Look, I got plenty of tables and cheap vodka, Mike. Okay, I got you covered. Tables and cheap vodka, easy.
All right. I'm a
you need the cheap
player.
vodka because it doesn't freeze.
As always, everything we do here, 12-team PPR. We are pre-recording this, so this is July 20th. If anything seems a little out of date, it's because that was about a week ago in your timeline. Yesterday, we talked about the Ravens, so it's nice to have back-to-back fantasy-relevant people here. But we're going into Buffalo, and we're going to jump right into it with Josh Allen. Again, like we have been talking about a couple of times. You know what? This is a rough way to start. We should have started with the back end because now we've been spoiled at quarterback. 3 of these episodes have already just been, whoa, we got a top 5 QB. Let's just skip right past it. But I mean, well, the obligatory, hey, look, it's Josh Allen. That's what are your feelings on Case Keenum? Let's talk about Case Keenum for a little while. Let's break that down. And when he starts in week 18, what do you think he's going to do? How many times is he going to hand the Gatorade directly to Josh Allen, or is he not even allowed to look at him when he's on the sideline?
Oh, he doesn't make eye contact. He's allowed to look in his general direction, but he's not allowed to actually make eye contact.
Right.
I mean, I will say, if we're going to do rankings, how do you rank Case Keenum's hat wearing ability as related to the other backups? Top 5 hat wearer?
I was going to say he could just, when he's coming off the field, he could toss Josh Allen the Gatorade, but it would just go to the other team. So
good night, folks.
The obligatory
there it is.
Case Keenum interception joke.
Show's over. Shut it down.
At least one of those tosses will go to Diggs. So that's good.
Yeah, one. For more quality humor like that, sign up for patreon.com/importantnonsense.
That is correct. I don't know. There's nothing to talk about here, right? Do you want Josh Allen 1 or 2? That's basically the debate. If you want to pay the price to get him in redraft, go right ahead. Enjoy.
I think everybody here has him at Q. We all have him at QB1, right? Yeah. Everybody on this show.
I have him at 2.
Projection or ranking? Because ranking I pulled from you.
Ranking 1, you're right.
Yeah, ranking 1, you've got to project it through. But I was talking about ranking. Ranking, we've all got him ranked as QB1.
You're right.
Very little analysis.
You are correct.
Very little analysis here, folks. Yes. He's good at football. We already took our mea culpas last year on that. Not doing it again. He's good at football.
Put him back-to-back QB1. He's literally, if you took a science experiment and just physically made all the attributes you want for a fantasy quarterback, that's Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. He's big, strong arm, runs the ball, doesn't get hurt very often. That's it. He's in a strong offense. Yeah, you're good.
Runs in the red zone.
Yeah.
All of it.
So
if there was an evil scientist who operated out of Buffalo and was trying to create a quarterback, he would create Josh Allen. It worked out perfectly. Went exactly as planned.
Yeah, so your question, Mike, in the pre-show was, are we worried about Brian Daboll leaving? No, in a word.
No. Yeah, no. I don't think the transition in offense is going to be that big, and I don't think it matters at all.
You had also talked about, does the emergence of Singletary cap Josh Allen's red zone rushing? And again, in a word, no. And I actually wrote, I think Steve would actually probably have more of an issue with emergence of Singletary than anything else that you wrote there. I think that's where we would spend all our time. So and if we're going to do that, we might as well just go to running back.
We can't just transition right to running back.
So going through running back. Last year, the debate was Devin Singletary or Zach Moss. And I believe that our exact advice was
Just the shrug emoji.
I need to curb your enthusiasm.
We
music
had
for that,
them.
too.
I vaguely recall that I had them both ranked at like 35 and 36 or 34 and 35, something like that. They were right next to each other outside of a range where I would ever draft either one of them. So it didn't matter to me. So I was just like, avoid both, don't care. One of them will emerge at some point, but it doesn't matter. And it didn't. It really didn't.
I did the same thing. I had them literally right next to each other because nobody could figure out what was going to happen. And they were both pretty far down into flex territory where it's like, if you want one of them, maybe one of them emerges, you can use them as a flex throughout the year. Okay.
Mhm.
But beyond that, nothing too sexy.
So what's been
with the
weird
backfield.
is, you've got Devin Singletary who emerged as the guy, quote unquote, at the end, and Zach Moss was given ample opportunity and was complete garbage.
They tried
Was
so
just
hard.
absolutely terrible every chance he got. So you knew he wasn't going to last into this season. They were going to do something to replace him. He was getting outplayed by Matt Breida, and they eventually let Matt Breida go when his contract expired at the end of the season. So who did they replace him with? Well, in free agency, they signed Duke Johnson. Yes, that Duke Johnson, the ghost of Duke Johnson, who was in Cleveland for so long and then Houston, and then he went to Miami and somehow was the starting running back over Myles Gaskin. Don't get me started. But he somehow was the starting running back for a while in Miami last season and put up good numbers. Was a usable PPR option the couple of weeks that he was the starter there. So when he came over here, it seemed like he was going to be the clear-cut third down running back, the pass-catching back that you could rely on. And then all of a sudden in the second round, they take James Cook, the brother of Dalvin Cook from Georgia, who is a pass-catching back who came from a committee in Georgia where he shared the workload, and he's basically going to try to do the exact same thing here. So for me, because we always talk about PPR, I would rather have James Cook than Devin Singletary personally, and I've projected him that way. I haven't updated my rankings to match that, Neil, so I know the information that you have on the sheet here is not going to reflect
You're fine.
that.
All of the rankings for this are weird.
Yeah.
If you're actually interested in rostering any of this and you're listening to this show, keep checking the rankings for all of us on importantnonsense.com because these will be, I think, some of the more heavily adjusted rankings, and we'll go through them in a moment. But this is one where we're going to get more information during the preseason. We're going to get a chance to look at some of this, and also we're just going to get information about guys on other teams. This is a very much a July ranking for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
So within that, I can just rip the Band-Aid off right now for you.
Go ahead.
I mean,
Yep.
Steve, you had Singletary at running back 44.
Yeah, and that has stayed the same.
Okay, that part stayed the same. The ECR has him at 30. And I was the one thing, and I've got him at 32. Now, the one thing that I wanted to talk about
and he's
here
going
was
at 29 in ADP, by the way.
That's the ADP I want to talk about, because you're talking about at that point that he's functionally going to be like your third running back, and it's like at that just saying it gives me heartburn. So he's one that I'm very cautious about. But to compare him to Cook, Steve, you had Cook at RB 41. I'm guessing that's the one that you've adjusted.
Yeah. So currently on my updated ranks, I have James Cook at 35.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not crazy, but it is moved up a tier.
You've got it the reverse of me. I've got Singletary at 32 and Cook at 41, and that's mostly because Cook is a rookie.
Yeah.
And it's a playoff team. So you're talking about that type of thing. But you're doing it the other way because of PPR. I can't argue with you in a real way about this because we're arguing about something that no one knows.
Right.
It's like arguing about who's the better basketball player, Sasquatch or the Yeti. I don't know. Like, and you probably like it's like, so it's going to come down to personal preference and what you think is most likely to happen.
What's the temperature in the arena? I think that's going to be
that's a good one. My greater point is I don't really want
Mike on that one.
Yeah. Mike's trying so hard to not laugh. Mike, you can laugh at our stupid jokes. That's what we're here to do. Like, that's what we're here for. Like, if I could, we should do this. We should do this show in full clown white makeup half the time. Yeah, exactly. I mean, feel free to laugh at us, but it's not a serious show. Mm-hmm. The one thing is I want to avoid this whole scenario if I can. And frankly, given the ADPs, I think it's pretty easy to do. So it's like I'd like to just avoid this if it's at all possible to do.
Well,
But you and I have it kind of flip-flopped between the two.
Yeah.
But let's take a look at that when we get further into the season. These are very much July rankings at this point.
Well, I think what we can talk about for sure is, unless Mike, you have something different, Zach Moss doesn't matter. It's
Zach Moss, agreed.
dead off the page.
Done.
Duke Johnson is somebody I was interested in with my initial projections before the draft because, again, thinking he'd be the third down pass catching back. I do think he has a role because of the two of them, James Cook is not a between the tackles guy. And Devin Singletary, not really a great pass catcher. That's why Duke Johnson was brought in. He's the only one of the three that somehow can do both. It's very bizarre, but he's essentially the backup for both roles, in my eyes. If something happened to Cook, Johnson immediately becomes the third down guy. If something happened to Singletary, I think Duke Johnson takes over as the between the 20s, and James Cook is still just the pass catching back. That's me personally. We'll see if they actually utilize them differently. I don't think there's any scenario where James Cook really has a full workhorse role here, is a bell cow in any way, shape, or form. But to me, again, like I said, I'd rather shoot upside. We know what Devin Singletary is. We know what the upside on Devin Singletary is. The upside on James Cook is the unknown. Is maybe he is the running back they've been looking for and can catch the ball and is a top 20 back when it's all said and done if Singletary gets hurt and is out. Whereas with Singletary, even with everybody hurt, I still don't think he's a top 20 back.
Yeah, I mean, we know what we have with Singletary, like you said, because he was given the job at the end because nobody else could do anything. He was just given it because Breda had one flash in, I think, the Patriots game and then completely fizzled out and was terrible. Zach Moss had multiple chances throughout the season and was terrible. Singletary was at least able to plot forward.
Yeah.
So at the end of the season, they wanted to stop Josh Allen from doing QB sneaks inside the 5 as much as they could because they said, hey, we're going to the playoffs already. Can we just score with somebody else? Singletary was able to score. 5 of his 7 touchdowns on the season on the ground came in the last 4 weeks of the season. And that's what you're going to get. He's not going to hit like 100-something yards rushing. He's never had 50 yards receiving. Like you say, he's not going to catch the ball. So he's a touchdown dependent running back on a strong offense. Cook, they've never passed the ball to the running back before.
Right.
Maybe they do it now. We don't know yet. But his upside is definitely a lot higher, especially in the PPR format, because he's a big play receiving running back.
And it's one of those things, too, where Josh Allen is still young enough, has still been in the league for a short amount of time that with what's been around him, does he really not want to throw to the running back, or has he never had a running back worth throwing to?
Because to be fair, they did try to throw the ball to Zach Moss at various points throughout that season, and he was just so bad as a receiver that they just stopped doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they tried.
Yeah. There's a chance, but he hasn't thus far.
Yeah, I would have to go back.
Well, he does that.
Go ahead.
If you want Cook, you can get Cook at he's valued at the ECR as running back 42. I would need an ADP on that for the other piece of relevant information, but
38.
Yeah, that's fine. You're talking about at that point, you're talking about he's like your 4th running back. He's like a flex. If you want to go for Cook at that point, I agree with you. It's probably worth it because you've got some level of upside. The one that scares me is Singletary. And I'm a little more bullish on it than either of you. And it still terrifies me what his ADP is, where I'm like, I don't want that. You're drafting him at his ceiling at like 20. Anything more than 30, I'd argue that's the ceiling. You're never going to get better than that. And
Right.
The other thing that's frustrating about Singletary, and this is just from my own heart as somebody who makes a lot of trades, you can't trade Devin Singletary. Like, not in a way that makes sense. He's one of the hardest things to trade because he's been on the league for long enough that the book is out and people know, like, especially in PPR, why would I want that guy? He doesn't catch any passes.
Yeah.
He's very hard to deal with, and it's very much the like khaki pants, super boring, like, at least I'll get something approach to this. And there is a place for that on certain teams, depending on the rest of your roster construction. But if you're picking up Singletary at anything even reminiscent of 30, and you're thinking, oh well, maybe he can play up and to be my RB2 at various. No, I don't think any of it.
Frightened if that was the case.
I'd be looking at my running back room like, where have I gone wrong here?
Yeah.
Like I've missed the boat somewhere.
2018, Josh Allen's rookie year, they had LaShawn McCoy when he was 30.
It's kind of unfair though. He actually
Yeah.
could catch.
It was back end McCoy.
But that was it was back end McCoy. So that's the best one, and he had 46 targets that season.
Okay.
And Chris Ivory was the RB2, had 21.
I forgot about that.
But basically every season since then, it's been Singletary. He had 41 targets 3 years ago. 2 years ago, he had 50. Last year, he had 50. And then last year with Singletary's 50, Zach Moss also had 32. So whoever is the primary pass catching back ends up around 50. Whoever is the number 2 pass catching back, somewhere around like 30, which I believe is roughly how I have it. Yeah, I have James Cook at 45 targets, and I have Duke Johnson at 29, Singletary at 17.
Out of curiosity, where did you re-rank Duke Johnson after the adjustment post-draft?
I think I have 60.
Okay, so he came because when I pulled it the other day, he was still at 51. So I was like, that's probably
60, right behind Mike Davis.
He came down a bit, but if you're going by the rest of the universe, they've got him as a total afterthought at like 88.
Right, like I said,
his ADP is probably worse than that.
I know I'm alone there because of the theory that I posed earlier, that Duke Johnson is essentially the backup for both roles, whereas the rest of the general public in ECR seems to believe if something happened to Cook, it would just be Singletary. If something happened to Singletary, it would just be Cook. I'm not swinging one way or the other. I think Johnson is there for a reason and has a solidified role on this team in some way, shape, or form. It's still a committee. It's just, what does the committee look like?
And I think that's another reason you look at Cook is because you were saying about for the trade value even alone for Singletary. There's no way his trade value really increases.
No.
It's going to be what it is. Like, people are going to see him as just a plotter that might go in for a touchdown. James Cook, people can get excited about if he has a big game somewhere.
Shiny new toy.
And you can try and get rid of him.
Yeah, shiny new toy theory. It's going to be so much easier to trade in a redraft league to trade James Cook.
Yeah.
And frankly, even if it's going bad, you could probably get close to what you paid, given what he's actually going for.
To me, for the running backs, what wraps it all up for Singletary in my evaluation of him, and the reason I'm so low on him, he finished as PPR running back 24 last year. And to your point, Mike, a lot of that was getting the touchdowns near the end of the season. You would really have to be projecting that out for the whole year, him consistently being a goal line back and scoring like that for that to matter. Because last season, he had almost 100 rush attempts more than any other running back on the team. And as I already mentioned, he had double the targets of any other running back on the team. And he still was only PPR running back 24. So, like, you're talking about his ceiling having 60 to 70% of the job last year. He hit RB 24, and you're going to take him at RB 29. You're dangerously close to where he's going to max out. There's no way you're returning on your investment. Whereas if I can get James Cook at 38, 35, 32 even, I feel like he can jump back and give me good value for what I invested.
I think we're all in agreement here. Fade Devin Singletary, acquire James Cook at their relative ADPs.
Yeah. Let's move on to wide receiver. Stefon Diggs, the poster child of upside this offseason, Gabe Davis, polarizing figure. You either apparently think he's top 5 or he's the most overrated wide receiver in the league. There's really no in between. You can't just be meh on Gabe Davis. And then our boy, Jamison Crowder, the ageless wonder, finds his way to a good team. He's earned it.
Goodbye, Cole Beasley.
He put in all those years. He served his time. Okay. Now, freedom.
Take that Cole Beasley job and run with it.
That's right. Cole Beasley did it. Okay. So Diggs, obviously, I think this is a clear-cut one, right? He's still in the top 5, top 10 conversation for everybody.
3 for me, 4 for you, based on.
I think if he's outside the top 5, you're crazy.
There you go.
There you go. Open and shut.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is Gabe Davis. So who takes over what is essentially the number 2 role there? And what is the number 2 role there, right? Because they had Emmanuel Sanders for the season to come in and be the opposite of Diggs, be the pass-catching guy to take some heat off of him. And then you had the underneath pass catcher being Cole Beasley. Beasley had no legs the back half of the season, could not get open at all. And then, I mean, he's opened his mouth one too many times and finds himself sitting out there doing nothing.
He did get one thing open repeatedly.
Yeah. So now Jamison Crowder takes over that role, who just continues to produce year in and year out. So there is the asterisk you can see on the depth chart there. Whenever you see that, I don't have Jack's key on here, but the asterisk means position battle. So in camp, there is a battle between Jamison Crowder and Isaiah McKenzie for that role. But Isaiah McKenzie's been battling for that role for what? Like, it feels like 2 decades. I mean, it feels like he's always in the conversation for that and just never wins the job.
Isaiah McKenzie's not good.
Right?
Going back to his days in Denver, he's not good. If you want a guy who can run some kicks for you, Isaiah McKenzie for $1. But if you want him to actually play wide receiver,
if you're in a punt return league,
Isaiah McKenzie all day. But if you want him to do anything that's like traditional wide receiver, I mean, that's why he's been given up on so many times, and he can't win this. He can't win the job. He couldn't beat 32-year-old Cole Beasley. Come on now.
Well,
what are we?
In that regard, then we're sitting there and we have the same conversation with Gabe Davis there because he couldn't beat 33-year-old Emmanuel Sanders for most of the season.
Emmanuel Sanders is decent.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people hate him.
Emmanuel Sanders wasn't good last year, though.
No, he was not.
I mean,
Davis
like,
still
body
of work.
Emmanuel Sanders is pretty good, but last year he was terrible.
If we're looking at it, Crowder is likely to be this starting slot. Yeah, but he also hasn't had the cleanest bill of health throughout his career. And so McKenzie played 1 game last year where he played like a majority of the snaps, played like over 85 snaps or percent of the snaps. And he went for 11 catches on 12 targets, 125 yards and a touchdown.
I remember.
And
I had to hear about it on Twitter for the next
Cole
6
Beasley
months.
just missed the game. So the slot receiver was gone. McKenzie stepped in, had a great game. Nothing happened other than that, but I mean, he showed he can do it.
Did he?
No. I mean, 125 yards on 11 catches.
The smallest of sample sizes of 1 game.
Yeah.
That he was able to do it.
I think the gist here is the slot position in Buffalo is one you should look at.
Yes, that I will 100%.
Because nobody targets wide receivers like Josh Allen the past 2 years. Literally, nobody has targeted them more than Josh Allen. So you want these wide receivers. And Jamison Crowder is the cheapest of the top 3.
Yeah, of the top 3, yes.
That's why McKenzie's going to be free. So if Crowder ends up getting injured at some point between now and the season, you should throw the dart at McKenzie and be happy.
Yeah.
McKenzie is for me like a guy you should know that exists for the waiver wire.
Right.
And beyond that, that's as much thought as I would put into it as far as preparing for your draft. Just know the name and that at some point you may be putting in a fab claim for this.
I think Neil and I are in the same boat where for us, it's Crowder clearly above McKenzie. I don't think he wins the job outright, but it is a name to know long term. I will say this, though. McKenzie's not even on the page. He's not ranked. He's not ADP. He's nothing. So if you want him, you can pick him up for free off waivers. Jamison Crowder's ADP is also unranked or undrafted. So, I mean, at this point, he's going outside of the top 16 rounds. If you want Jamison Crowder, you can get him off of waivers as well. Either one of these guys are pickups, or at the very worst, take Crowder with your very last pick.
That's what I was going to say. The interesting thing about Crowder is that despite the fact he doesn't really have an ADP, if you're going by expert rankings, I've got him at 63, you've got him at 65, and the ECR generally has him at 69, which in a 12-team league, that is something that would technically get drafted.
Sure. Yeah,
so that's the last player of the draft. Last player of the draft is what I'm saying, because I'd be happy to. It's similar to Cole Beasley, not last year, even the year before. No, it was 2 years ago. Nobody wanted old man Cole Beasley. Like, nobody cared. And then he rattled off darn near 1,000 yards. And suddenly he became a thing. If Crowder can stay healthy, that's the season. You're talking about something that you could pick up at the end of your draft. And if he can just play the games, which I know I'll concede has historically been a little bit of a sticking point. If he can do that, you're looking at that Cole Beasley style season, which, as we know in PPR, I mean, that's been very useful to fantasy players over the last several years.
It all depends on your league. If you're in a deep league, you start a lot of players, then yes. Like if you start 3 already and you have a flex or 2, Jamison Crowder could be your 4th or 5th wide receiver that you start every week. He could be in that top 50 on a given week just because of the pure volume, like you're talking about in the slot. But again, if you're asking me, the one side I will agree with Mike on is, if you're saying between Crowder and McKenzie, who gives you the bigger upside, it's McKenzie, because the upside for Crowder is he gives you that consistent floor in that top 45, top 50 range.
Sure.
Whereas with McKenzie, if all of a sudden he does replicate what he did in the one game, then suddenly he's giving you the Cole Beasley season you're talking about from a couple of years ago, where he was top 24 when nobody wanted to draft.
Yeah, he put up 1,000-yard season and had a bunch of touchdowns and stuff like that. I'll concede that it's within the realm of possibilities. I'm just going to put it very, very, very low. It's like margin for error level low that could happen. But hey, weird things do happen. It's an oblong ball made of pig guts that is oddly shaped. So, do we want to talk about Gabriel Davis? We started just dove right into Jamison Crowder, as this show tends to do. We should probably actually talk about Gabriel Davis. Mike, what do you think? Well, I know Steve mentioned it's very polarizing. That definitely comes through in the numbers. How are you feeling about Gabe Davis for 2022?
I mean, as polarizing as he is, which seems like Steve said, you have to either think he's going to be a wide receiver 1, basically, or on the cusp of it, or you have to think that he's going to flounder and be one of the worst draft picks that you can make in a draft, which I don't think you have to do that. He can be in the middle, and I expect him to be. No,
you have to make that call.
I they think he's
Twitter demands it.
3 or 4 rounds overdrafted or 3 or 4 rounds underdrafted. No, he's going. I don't know his exact ADP right off the top of my head, but I think he's around the
27.
That's like what? 5th round or something like that. We're looking at.
No, wide receiver 27.
Okay, so yeah, middle round.
Hold on, I got this. 7th round.
7th round. But Gabriel Davis's shtick at this point is he catches touchdowns a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's the big time guy that happens to be the target in the red zone and for first downs and things like that. Over his 2 seasons, nobody has caught more passes, more percentage has been touchdowns and first downs than Gabe Davis. And as we saw in the playoff game, he can have a big game. He was meant to be a big play wide receiver coming out of college from UCF. But we also know that 4th round wide receivers don't pan out all the time. And we said earlier, why didn't he play more when Emmanuel Sanders and all these other older guys were getting on the field?
And I could forgive some of that because Emmanuel Sanders was your established veteran. You're a playoff football team. You're trying to do something. It's not. I don't want to turn the keys over to Gabe Davis and say, "Hey, good luck, kid. Don't go crash the car." Like it kind of makes a certain amount of sense, especially given the relative age of Gabe Davis at that time. Now it's a little more interesting because you've removed some of these pieces from the pie in terms of his direct competition. But the issue that I have is, we'll just get right into it. ECR has Gabe Davis at wide receiver 27 to the point that was made about you have to have an opinion.
That's the ADP too.
That's also his ADP. So that's the general consensus seems to be you're talking about very tippy top of wide receiver 3. Frankly, he could be a wide receiver 2 on certain teams. I've got him at 36. Steve has him at 38. My concern here is it's a very crowded team with a lot of things that have to happen. And I view it as kind of volatile. You're going to have some games where Gabe Davis goes off and puts up some touchdowns and does Gabe Davis playoff game things that we're talking about here, where he can have a big game. And you're going to see it. He's going to have some of that stuff. But it's just, I don't view it as super consistent because you're going to have too many weeks where Stefon Diggs get his. You're going to have weeks where you're going to play against good secondaries and then Jamison Crowder and Dawson Knox feast over the middle because that's just who's uncovered. You'll probably have some weird weeks where Josh Allen plunges. They get down to the 1 yard line and Josh Allen scores 2 rushing touchdowns. There's too much volatility here for me to really want to get into rostering Gabe Davis at that level. If I could acquire Gabe Davis at the previous price point where he was like a low end wide receiver 3 or a flex for me, I would be a lot more interested because then I'll deal with the fact that there's probably going to be some inconsistencies here and some kind of weirdness. But if I'm rostering Gabe Davis at the price point that's, I just question if will it actually be consistent enough to function as a proper wide receiver 2, top end wide receiver 3 for my team.
That was kind of my point on the pick of direction was at this point, he's basically going back end wide receiver 2. So you're essentially all in or all out.
Yeah. And for me, I'll just let it go. There's
out.
more consistent things, more proven things at that level that I think you can do.
Yeah.
It's going for a strong offense. And you're trying to take it. It's like people drafting the wide receiver 2 in KC for so many years.
Yeah.
Always works out great 100%. Too, by the way.
Yeah.
Always works out great. Never blown up in anybody's face doing that.
Not a single time. Nope.
Never happened. Mecole Hardman has done nothing but put smiles on people's faces.
Tight end. Dawson Knox. Strong showing. Back half of last year, if you listen to the nerd at least. Pretty decent, good run at the end of the season. OJ Howard, however, the boy who never could down in Tampa Bay, gets another shot going up to Buffalo and now is the backup, or is he the guy, or is he going to get more involved? Is this more of a share? What
I just like.
What do we think about the?
I just like the boy who never.
What do we think about the situation here with the tight ends in Buffalo?
I'm terrified of all of it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a Dawson Knox guy, quote unquote, and then adding OJ Howard to it is, I mean, that's not nothing. And Dawson Knox had some really nice flashes last year when he was getting heavily involved and before he got kind of nicked up. But I think them bringing in OJ Howard tells you everything that you need to know about how the Bills themselves feel about this. They need to have another guy, and certainly it's not Tommy Sweeney. So they went out and did something.
Definitely was not the case.
It was not Tommy Sweeney. So they went out and did something about it. I think they need to have 2 guys. And OJ Howard, to me, is just good enough to where it cuts into that Dawson Knox. And I don't have the ADP in front of me. I do have our rankings. Steve, you had him at 15. I had him at 13 when I pulled this. I'm actually going to knock him down a couple spots in the update that I'm doing for this weekend. There's just guys I like better. And it just, there's less crowded rooms too.
Mm-hmm. And
it just, I'm a little nervous that this could all just be a giant smoke show, and then OJ Howard actually pulls in too much for it to, and then they just nothing matters anymore. It becomes a Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry.
You know what this feels like to me? We talked about this a lot a couple episodes ago with Zach Ertz. He's in the same neighborhood, ADP wise, as Zach Ertz, going in the 8th round.
Yeah.
So to me, this is an area where I want to punt tight end anyway. If I don't get one of those top guys, I'm completely out on it as is. But this whole situation, offense, the tight ends, which one is it? We don't know. This feels a lot like Dallas from last year, where there was a lot of hype about Blake Jarwin and the connection with Blake Jarwin. And he was the guy, and he was going to be the one, and he was the one you should talk about. And then all of a sudden, it's Dalton Schultz, who was going undrafted. He was like tight end 30 off everybody's board. He wasn't even close, wasn't even talked about. And he became the guy, and now he's like a top 6 pick at tight end this year. I think this could be the same situation where OJ Howard,
the nerd got right.
Yeah,
he's got a long enough memory. The nerd was all in on that, and we all told him.
OJ Howard is the guy who has never been given the opportunity. He's always been the backup in Tampa Bay, and now here he is, healthy, in a good situation in Buffalo, where they don't necessarily throw to the tight end that much. But I mean, if he's the athletic pass catching one of the two of them, he has every opportunity to jump up here. And he's right now tight end 34. He's going so far off ADP. I mean, you could be in a 22 team league and he still wouldn't be on ADP. He's so far off the board. So OJ Howard is a guy that you can absolutely throw a dart at and could be absolutely nothing, but could be something at the end of your draft.
Or he'd be a fantastic waiver claim.
Yeah, easy
That's
waiver.
Probably what more I thought about.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're looking at Knox, like the big comparison is going to be because of his breakout out of nowhere type season is Robert Tonyan from 2020. Robert Tonyan in 2020 had 11 touchdowns out of nowhere. Dawson Knox had 11 touchdowns last year. Robert Tonyan had 3 games where he reached at least 50 receiving yards, but that was it. He was mostly touchdown reliant. You know how many Dawson Knox had this past year?
I'm going to go with
Just
3.
3.
Just the way you led that question in. I
didn't want to make it too confusing.
Mike, you can't be a lawyer.
Yeah.
You ask too many leading questions. You're going to get a lot of objections.
I wasn't planning ever to be a lawyer.
Sustained.
Lawyer and doctor, those weren't really a part of my game plans when I was growing up.
Sustained.
So, I mean, he's a scary tight end to take at his ADP.
Yeah.
I think Steve nailed it. At that, once you get past Goddard, I think we see this the same way, Steve. Once you get past Goddard, I'll just wait till the end. Y'all have fun hitting each other with sticks. I'm good. I'm just going to load up on other places, and we'll just pick up 2 guys at the end of the draft if I need to. And flip coins until I eventually find something.
Your Albertos, your David Njokus.
Well, we'll get to the Irv Smith stuff. That'll be a long conversation when we get there.
Yeah.
Mike, I will say this: it's been an absolute pleasure because you and I have podcasted together before, but not for 4 hours. And I will say, just my one thing, please, just in the future, this is a Jamison Crowder podcast, and we don't sully him by comparing him to Isaiah McKenzie, who's barely in the league, and Khalil Shakir, who might play football one day.
I mean, I liked Khalil Shakir coming into the draft, and then I was like, oh, he dropped to the 5th round. Shoot.
Yeah,
that sucks.
That did hurt.
That's basically how it goes.
Maybe they don't think like I did.
Rounding it all out, I've got Tyler Bass at 7 in my kickers, and he's going at 6 in ADP, so there you go. It is what it is. And then defense, I only have the way that my defenses work is pretty fun to me, at least. I have Tampa Bay and Buffalo in a tier, and then everybody else. Doesn't matter. It's pretty much all the same after that to me. Those are the only 2 that I would consider a cut above. So if you wanted to, splurge in the 14th round on a defense, it would be one of those 2 for me. Buffalo's in that category. Right now in ADP, they are the number 1 defense in ADP. So you'd have to spend to get them. What would that be?
More than I'd want.
No, it's 17th round, so it's actually correct.
It's actually
so there
right.
you go. You did it, America.
First time in 20 years of playing fantasy football, they actually did it.
That the number 1 ADP defense is still in the round it's supposed to be in.
It's July. Don't worry. It's July. This will all get screwed up by August.
It'll be the 8th round by the time we get through August.
Don't worry. That'll be on the wrap-up show. We'll make a note of this conversation. 100%. Bring it back.
But it's pretty straightforward. So there you go. We've done it. Next up tomorrow, Carolina. Before we get there, closing thoughts on Buffalo?
No. Like I said, you need that vodka
just
there.
Just Jamison Crowder and that's it? Just
Jamison Crowder, and we managed to get through the end of the episode without Spike and Mike through a flaming table, which I'm kind of disappointed.
Well, I was about to set the table on fire, but now you've...
All right. Well, let's do it. Let's get the cameras. Let's go.
Get all this vodka out. Might as well put it to use.
Exactly. All right. Well,
I was just going back to my college years.
Till tomorrow, everybody. Keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!